places, rain in other places, snow and rain both in other places. So I want to welcome you to our Tennessee Funding Review Engagement Urban District. This is meeting 4. As you know, we have a total of 6 meetings, and today we will go through a number of areas. So why don't I start off with the statement? And the reason I read this statement is because instructions from the Attorney General's office, we are asked to read this statement before each meeting. So I will go ahead and read this statement. The Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in a new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will be ultimately included in the proposal new funding formula. So that is the statement that we are requesting to read before each meeting. So we will continue on. So Dominique, would you pull up the next item for us, please?
Yes, before I do that, I'm going to go and grab the link for the Google document that has the list from the previous meeting and put it in the chat.
That'd be great.
So, and then I'll pull back up the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, that has been put in the chat for you all. And if you'll just tell me which slide you want me to go to. And okay. let me check attendance really quickly too, to make sure I've captured everybody that's on. I have Cato, Angela, Yolanda, Doris, Chris, Terrence, Cardell, and Candy. Have I missed anyone? And Tom.
Yeah.
Tom,
and
I
Ted,
got you.
Yeah, Ted Cornelius.
Ted.
Okay.
I got you, Ted. Sorry. Just couldn't read my own writing.
Okay. Why don't we go to start with the overall statement, and then we'll go to each part. Okay. As you know, at our last meeting, what we did, we went through the overall, the base, the weights, the direct funding, the outcomes, and others. And so what we have been asked to do, as we look at the overall that we received, the guiding question is, are there any other broad recommendations you would include here that we didn't include the last time? As you can see, we requested districts should not receive less funding than they currently receive in the BEP. We had this discussion as all the chairs with the commissioner, so that is something that everyone has made sure to focus strongly on. Flexibility for local district budgeting. Ensure whatever is currently funded outside of the BEP is included in the new formula. Local match should be reconsidered. County commissioners and maintenance of efforts should not change school district. Is there anything that we are missing that we didn't have in here the last time that any of you can think of, especially as it relates to urban districts? Cordell, Angela, Terrence, anyone? Ted? Okay, if there's nothing that we didn't miss.
Cato,
Yes, please.
I don't think we missed anything, but is there anything about, as I'm looking at the work that the State Department is putting out, is there anything that we need to address saying about weights? So if they go to a student-based budgeting model, certain things will have weights as we discussed before. Do we need to call that back here? That we
I'll
need
tell
to
you
be
what.
very mindful of the weights when it comes to the different parts of the state, because we're always going to have more high mobility than a small rural town. I'm just trying to think through that.
No, I'm glad you brought it up. When we go to the weights, let's look at what we have in the weights, and if we need to add some additional part, let's do it in the weight section. Is that all right?
I agree.
Okay, okay. Why don't we pull up the next slide then? Okay, the base. This is what we talked about last week, and this is what we had in here last week. With the base, we had teacher salaries and benefits, number of positions, and adequate salaries. Teachers, attracting those with specialized skills, working with certain subsets of students, principals, assistant principals, librarians, social workers. We added counselors, instructional materials, technology. What else do you see that we need to make sure that we have in this way in the base section?
This is Candy.
Yes, Candace.
So on the counselors, does that include like behavior support specialists, those types of positions?
Yes, and in fact, what we can do is we can make sure that we even itemize those. But yes, let's make sure we add that into to make sure that that is thoroughly understood when we make our final recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And that may be called other things in other districts. But
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And
Add
also,
that in
no,
as
go
an
ahead.
addition, just to make sure. I will add that in as a new item recommendation.
Okay.
Something else that you all can do if you want, as you're going through this, is prioritize whether you think that these items are must-haves or should-haves or nice-to-haves or long shots.
That's a great point. And when you will have you have this document, you can send information back to me and Dominique, things you want us to make sure we include, things that you feel as you look at all of these, this is a must-have. This is a should-have, this is a nice-to-have, so that we make sure we characterize those. But is it anything that as a group you feel we missed in the base? Because these are the things we went over in the last meeting.
Was this the place to have transportation? I'm sorry, the place
Go
to have
ahead.
transportation?
Yeah, let's see, we got base, weight, direct funding, we have outcomes, we have others. So, Claudette, we can certainly put transportation, that's not a problem. We can add it here, and Dominique and I will be going through this again, so if it needs to go somewhere else, we'll put it in another category.
And another little reminder, just from something that I've heard the commissioner say, and I think she might have said it, Cato, on the chairs meeting that you attended. Anything that's already currently funded in the BEP or outside of the BEP will be funded in this model.
Right, she did.
Some capacity.
Yeah, she made that very plain in our chairs meeting, and she said that when we talked to her one-on-one. So that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Cato, this is Ted. I had a quick
Ted.
question. I know I had brought this up before, and I'm not sure if this is where it fits or not, but you know, as community partners come alongside school systems related to other supports, whether it's around school-based programming or providing food for kids or things like that. I don't know that. I'm just bringing that up, just wondering if that's being considered in any of the different categories, and maybe that's as we continue to keep moving along. But I know that that's one that continues to, and it's different per school district, but I know that a lot of our community partners provide a lot of different services that aren't currently funded, but they have to raise money for in order to support.
Ted, you will see that when we get to direct funding. It
Perfect.
is on the list, and as we discussed the last time, I know that's important to a lot of us because our Children's Hospital Labana has relationships with community partners, and others have relationships with things that you're doing. So when we get to direct funding, make sure you see whether we articulate it that well. So, but
Perfect.
it is
Thank
in
you.
there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else in the base? Okay, if not, we'll go to the weights because and I know there was issues about some of the things in the weights. If you will look at the weights, we have the following are the areas that receive the most positive feedback in terms of what should be weighted. And what we had, unique learning needs, economic disadvantage, concentration on poverty, students with disability, gifted students, and you see all the areas that we listed there. And I know one question came up with, is it anything else or what else do we need to make sure is a part of this section?
You know, Cato, at one point, I remember someone bringing up, there's a strong effort around the adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
And that may again be later on, but I don't know if that fits in the category of unique learning needs. But I know someone else had brought that up in earlier conversations.
Yeah, we did. And in fact, talked about that and some of the other things we did. We also had a section that didn't fit into the wage direct funding outcome, where we listed a number of other things that we wanted to make sure we looked at. And I do have that list also, and we'll get that out to you. But I'm glad you brought that up. What else are we missing, or are we missing anything else that we didn't discuss last time as relates to the weights?
I just had a question on the.
Okay, though, I'm fine with this. I didn't know we had a separate slide, so I agree with this slide.
Okay, thank you. Okay, someone else is speaking. Thank you, Angela.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
This
that's
is
fine.
Candy.
Candy?
These look wonderful. I'm glad we got a lot of feedback on these, especially the concentration of poverty and also the students with disability. Really, everything that's on here. But why is it under students with disabilities? It lists out gifted, and then it's got dyslexia separate. So are those separate, or students with disabilities? I thought dyslexia would go under that one.
I think it probably does. When the original round of feedback, I don't think that some of this was, when we were doing the committee feedback, maybe that wasn't something that was called out, and it has been called out since from subcommittees. And so this is more of a compilation of subcommittees. And I don't think it's intended to keep it completely separate. It's just to call it out as a unique need.
Candace, how would you like to see that?
I think it just needs to have the heading students with disabilities, i.e.,
Okay.
and then kind of list out. So
Okay.
not to make one more important than the
Okay.
others.
Okay. As our committee, is everyone in agreement with that? We'll do it this way with our committee.
Yeah, this is Ted. I agree with that because you could probably have some others argue that there may be another category there that is important to them that wonder why it wasn't specifically listed out. So I think that's a good recommendation.
Okay. No problem. We can certainly
So
do
Cato,
that. Yes.
and I'm sorry, let me chime back in as I'm looking and reading. I do think, again, and I guess I'm asking the team, do we really call out mobility? So I understand rural, but do we call out mobility for large school districts? That's the only thing I worry about, because I just know we have a high mobility rate.
It's a good point. Excellent point. What does the group think? Yes.
This is Chris Henson. I agree. I think that mobility is very, very much an issue for large urban districts, and much more so than others.
Okay. Excellent point. And one of the things Dominique and I were talking about the other day, we want to make sure in our discussion, as we relate, when we talk about what are in particular the things and the needs as relates to urban. So anything that all of you feel need to be included in here, please have no hesitation about adding it. So we'll make sure that that's added.
Hey, Kato, this is Terrence.
Yes, sir.
My question though is, if we're the urban subcommittee and we're focused on the weights, I guess I'm not understanding why, or what's the context for rural going on this list?
Yep.
What we put on, this wasn't what our committee put. This was put on in the overall general discussion with all the committees. And what we will do, Terrence, in fact, as we keep going through this, what we will do, we will look at the things we need to take off that doesn't relate to rural. And when we bring that back to you guys say, well, did you take that off? Because one of the things that they have told me as chairman, I can take off something or add something. I just have to bring it, make sure you guys in agreement with it, or if it's something I feel strong about, I won't tell you I did it. So, okay. But that's an excellent point. We will take care of that. How does everyone else feel about me just using chairman's prerogative and taking care of that?
I think that's
I
a
agree.
great suggestion. I did have where it says rural. So you're adding urban, or you're just taking rural off and
Just take
adding
rural.
mobility?
Yeah, just take rural off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cato, this is Chris Henson again. One thing that I've mentioned in previous subcommittee meetings relating to economically disadvantaged would be the undocumented students that are not currently captured in the economically disadvantaged component of the current formula. As we know, federal law requires school districts to educate all students regardless of documentation status. I just want to be sure that that's noted somewhere, that those students typically aren't being captured economically disadvantaged when direct certification is used because they don't qualify for those benefits.
Okay. Dominique and I will make a note of that, and we'll have that as one of our notes.
Hey, this is Cardell, and I think this is something that Chris mentioned in a previous call, and this might go to Terrence's point about the urban-rural piece, but the cost of living differential in urban areas was one of the things that was mentioned about a potential weight or something that needed to be addressed for a higher cost of living and potential higher salary needs and things like that.
Tell you what, I do have that in the next area in direct funding.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You will see when we get to direct funding. And that's the reason I want to go through it like this. So you will see some things we talked about, we put in other buckets. So, and put it when we see that, make sure we are articulating it as you guys stated it before, but it is in direct funding. So if we have nothing else with weights, let's go to our areas of, it's been called both additional dollars and direct funding, and see the things that we have here. And let me tell you the areas that you guys put in last time, and it was DEI practices of school, diversity at schools, hiring practices, more dollars currently underfunded, whole child, whole family, more dollars for technology, more dollars for summer programming, apprenticeships and internships. And this is one I felt strongly about because we've talked about what is happening in particular in Memphis with the needs of employers, be it healthcare, be it hospitality. We've been talking about, can we set up academies with Shelby County schools and Labana and Methodist and Baptist and others. We've talked about even relationships, and I had this discussion with the senator's office with Shelby County schools and Blue Oval with the Ford plant. So we have apprenticeships and internships. And then Cordell, here's how we have it listed. Adjustment for higher cost of doing business in urban districts, setting cost of living, cost of housing, etc. Does that pretty well articulate it or capture it?
I think I'm gonna defer to Chris because I think he was the one who raised it and had more information about it than I did.
Okay, adjustment for higher costs of doing business in urban districts and settings, cost of living, cost of housing, etc. And we go on. Chris, does that hit it?
It does. The only thing I would add, which could be in the et cetera, would be the higher wages that urban districts must pay to be able to hire people to work in the school system, since they have so many more opportunities for other jobs, et cetera, and in addition to just the higher cost of housing, but the higher wages that we must pay.
Okay, we
Thank
will
you.
add that in. And Chris, the other one, I think you mentioned this, incentivize district schools forming partnerships with nonprofits, not-for-profits, community organizations, and others. And that was one of the other areas that we had in there. And that's something that we feel strongly about here because there's so many partnerships we look at. There are partnerships that Labana has as it has related to asthma and housing and things like that. So we have that. Does that capture incentivize district schools forming partnerships with not-for-profit and community organizations? Does that capture it? Is there anything else we need to add?
Is this, Cato, are you asking under this additional dollars piece?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Can I'd like to add, and I can't remember if we mentioned it before, but I think we specifically believe research supports that ninth grade is a particularly important transitional year. And we know SES is doing a lot of great work in this and has to require some additional dollars to really focus on ensuring ninth graders are on track. And that would be something that we would say should be considered for additional dollars, is ninth grade on track.
Dominique, why don't we put that on? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to definitely agree with Cardell, but I also, so I go back and forth. I know that we have that we call out literacy, and I think the commissioner's done a great job in having this the literacy campaign. But I feel we always need to call it out, because I don't want people to forget that literacy across the state is at a low rate. So I think that if we're constantly calling out literacy, it is for the advancement for all, definitely for urban school districts, because we struggle with literacy, but as well as I look at the state scores, it's not that we are, even as a state, we're excelling in literacy. So can we, or
would you want that in direct funding or in the outcomes section?
I think it's for that. I think it probably needs to be for both, and maybe we just leave it in direct funding. But when I think about additional dollars, if you're going to be giving additional dollars, it would definitely still be in the vein of literacy. So I guess, Dominique, that's where I go back and forth and I grapple, because I don't want to just keep beating a dead horse, but that is the horse that we're on right now in teaching kids how to read.
Okay. We can put it in direct funding, one category, and we didn't put sub bullets under here. When we said more dollars currently under funding, do we put sub points there? Or as both of you talked about, when we look at outcomes, but let's make sure we capture it somewhere. We will make sure it's captured. And when we look at this again, go ahead.
Question on high dosage tutoring in fourth grade. Why do we need that if our focus for literacy is K3? Because you need to be reading by then. So what is this about?
When the law kicks in, the retention piece of the law kicks in the upcoming years, it is required for that as one of the choices for students who did not perform on the assessment as expected. So tutoring has to be one of those choices in lieu of retention, and it's not funded. It's not currently planned to be funded. I believe that would be why that's here.
Okay, thank you for that. And I don't know if this is additional dollars or direct dollars, but teacher diversity, I know the state board passed something for local districts to have to implement. Is that on here on this document anywhere?
We have it in direct funding, diversity of school,
Oh,
hiring practice. Yeah, we have it in direct funding. What we will do, make sure when Dominique and I talk, we'll make sure it is well articulated so there's uh, a true understanding of what we mean here.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else in direct funding or additional dollars? And we will get this out to you. So if you see area or if there's something you didn't think we included, just make sure that we look at that. Okay. Why don't we go to outcomes? And in our outcomes here, we talked about self-reported student surveys, mental health measures, ACEs, going to college and college completion rates, ninth grade on track rates. Cordell mentioned that a few minutes ago, closing the achievement gap, reading proficiency, pathways, what pathways are they on the pathways, along with those general things, those areas that had been mentioned in general discussion. What is it between what has already been mentioned and what you as a group mentioned in our last meeting that we had?
Is this outcomes the graphic that was on that first slide that we saw before we started moving through?
Let's go back.
Yes, that one. So at the top it says outcomes. This is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is this meant to be punitive, or is it so saying districts would get more money if they had certain outcomes for this in these areas?
Yes, just trying to put some additional outcomes around one of the ways of thinking about it would be those traditionally higher needs student groups. So, maybe if you close some gaps or you have, with in proficiency and literacy, and those would be ways to incentivize the districts, not necessarily punitive, but additional funding based on those outcomes when they do these things or have these completion rates or any of the things that are listed.
And this
So,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, this was in the general feedback. And so that's the reason we're looking at those things which we agree or disagree or want to modify. We can put in our own urban report that's different. But these were the general comments that was captured when you look at all 15 groups that have made comment and public groups and public meetings. So, but go ahead, anything you think we need to add or you want to make an addendum to, that's not a problem.
I think it's a little bit concerning that, some of these are unfunded, right? And so districts who do have those community partners, like when I worked at the Nashville Chamber, we spent over maybe 200,000 plus supporting MNPS with their certification programs in high schools. And then you have districts who, are going to have more students. If you think of literacy scores in third grade, and then you think about their middle schoolers and their high schoolers that are going to be taking more AP courses and completing those compared to some of the urban districts who have to get students so far, like have to work so hard to get them caught up to even be ready. So that's why I asked, was it punitive? Because it sounds like, not to pick on any district, but like a Williamson County is going to end up getting all this incentive money, and then maybe a metro schools if they're not doing as well, or Memphis City or Memphis Shelby County. So again, I think I get the point, but it could have some unintended consequences of punishing those. So I'm thinking additional funding, give people more money for all of these things. If you say, we'll give urban districts and rural districts more money for these in additional budgetary, money to be able to get the outcomes.
So
So
I
I just
wonder,
don't see how that would happen.
I wonder if there's a space for you all to go back up to the direct funding category
That's what I
and
was
make sure
thinking.
that you call out some of those things that you just named to reiterate the importance of those types of programs being directly funded for districts. And you can call it out, you know, with the reasons that you just said. And then maybe you could come up with some outcomes to add to the list that would be beneficial to urban districts.
Why don't you do that and get that to us? One of the advantages with Dominique being here is the fact that she hears the discussion from all of the other subcommittees and what they're saying. So that is a great point you made. Why don't you put that in the direct funding or additional dollars, and we'll make that part of our urban school recommendation. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would love if anybody else has any concerns on these outcomes, because again, I mean, if money's tied to it, and you know that poverty is an indicator in, you know,
True.
student success, of course, you've got to just be mindful of those things when you do incentivize people or
Excellent
districts.
point.
Let me say this. I think so. I will have to agree, and then I also I think an earlier statement, and I was trying to make sure that I listened. Um, we want it to be punitive. We don't want this to be punitive, right? Because if still the school districts who are doing well will receive more money, then the school districts who are struggling and trying to get to that level, we still will have less. The whole idea of this is to say, to me, places where we know that students and our families need more support, then we want to definitely make sure that we provide. So I think there's a both and, but I just don't want I want it to be the point that schools who are struggling not going to meet all of these things. And so we're still going to be in the same boat where we started.
Great
That's
point.
my only, so I do agree with that.
That's why I'm, you know, encouraging you all to think of some things that those
Yes.
schools would
Exactly.
benefit from. So, you
Got
know,
you.
and we can add them to the list right now if you can think of some things that
Yeah,
would be.
we will. We'll not.
So
We'll
I would
not
think that what I would want, what I would want to see here, definitely growth. And so I think that while we're on the road to where we want to be with achievement, I think there should be some type of growth measure that as schools are growing students by a certain percentage, then also that needs to be called out as well.
That's a great point. Growth, and then if you put early post secondary, is duplicative to put AP course. I think that's part of EPSOs,
It
correct?
is. It's part of your EPSOs, so you don't
It is.
need the AP.
Yeah, I would take that out. Just put EPSOs. And so is industry recognized credentials or certification. That's an EPSO too.
Yes. So it's almost like you're double dipping.
Yeah.
And that's the reason we put these up here, because when we look at the general comments that have been made, our job is to make sure we reflect those things that we need strong consideration for urban schools. So the things that you mentioned, we will make sure that they are in our document. Urban, not general comments. So Dominique, did we pretty well capture that? And if there are things you about, send them to Dominique. She and I be talking about those, and we will get those within the document.
And I also think not only and I know we've been talking about our undocumented students, but I think there's a place in here, and Dominique and maybe other people on the call, as I think about English language learners, as I also think about again, with us being an urban school district, with us having an influx of many diverse students, and when I think of our ELL students, also I'm thinking about the growth that they make as well, based on the testing measures or the testing measurement system that we give them as well, or the test that we give them. So
Okay.
again, looking at growth, not only with reading and math with our traditional students, but also looking at that growth that we make with our ELL students.
Okay, gotcha. Any other comments as relates to outcomes and the things that we had in our list and the things that Angela and others have just mentioned, that or any other things you want to get to Dominique? So when she and I go through our prep session, we will be discussing these.
One
Kato,
other
this
thing
is Ted. Oh, go ahead.
Go, Ted. I've been talking.
I was just gonna say, and I'm probably the not the smartest person around all of this, so I'm still learning a lot here. But I guess as I'm listening to this, I'm just thinking we're focused on urban, but not all of our urban areas are the same, or the makeups are the same. And I guess as I'm hearing that, you know, if funding's attached to performance for each of these urban areas, and maybe you've already said this, but I don't know how we take some of that into consideration, just knowing that that's a fact, that all of our urban areas are not the same, and there are the challenges are different, I guess.
So Ted, that's why I want them to, so I agree. So I think that not only am I thinking about the performance on the test as far as achievement, but I'm also, that's why I wanted us to call out the growth, because even on the, you know, so if we're looking at our TBOS scores in a school or a district, we go from 1 to 3. So definitely we're not in the, we haven't met our achievement, but we're on the right track. But still, to honor the work that we're doing and being able to be true to that, still we are funding schools and funding districts that have some additional barriers, but yet they are still growing and moving students.
We got that down. We got it. What else? And we had in some of our discussions last meeting, there were a number of areas that we had. For instance, we had, and Ted, I think you mentioned this and a couple others, and I captured those notes, sub-communities where poverty is higher in certain areas, even within urban areas. So we had that, because someone had North Nashville, Williamson County, so we had that. We talked about areas like telehealth and mental health sites in schools. Those of us in healthcare will tell you, we have seen our indicators in telehealth go from 2,000 a month to 32,000 a month. We're seeing more and more of that. So we had that down here. We had social determinants of health issues. So there are a number of other issues that we're going to make sure become a part of the document, become a part of the discussion. And you don't have to wait until this meeting to get things to me and Dominique that we can have in the document, that we can discuss. There are things that the commission and I will discuss directly. So we have pretty well gone over quite a few things. I want to make sure we even had in here how health matters affect school attendance. Things like that we're going to be looking at. We had in here facilities. And that's one of the things that we had not. So we have a whole number of things we're going to be looking at. And something else I want to make sure, one of the things we'll focus on, and Angela, Ted, all of you, Cordell, this will go to some of our discussion in our next meeting. Before the next meeting, there will be a draft funding formula document that will come out. And Dominic, correct me if I'm wrong, that will actually get to us before the next meeting, right?
That is correct. It's my understanding that the draft should be released sometime next week. It'll be open for public comment, and when it's open for public comment, you will get to see that public comment as well as the draft of the formula. So that's one of the reasons I, really encourage you to make sure you have everything listed that you can. I'm turning these recommendations in as they're working on this draft. So, you want to make sure that the things that are important to your group are listed. And if there's some things on here that you want to prioritize as must-haves and should-haves, then now would be a really good time to do that.
Yeah. And anything you want to send us before the next meeting, before we get into the discussion, do not hesitate, because Dominique and I make sure we're talking before the meetings, and we will make sure we capture the things that are most important to you. What did we miss in this meeting that you want to make sure we do in the things we know? Is there anything you guys think we missed?
I didn't see anything, unless I missed it because I have a migraine today, so forgive me. But about diversity in here, I know I talked about the teacher diversity goals being something that the state school board passed, but are we going to incentivize for that since that's a goal?
I have it on the direct funding list.
I have it in my document.
No, I meant for outcomes. I'm sorry.
Oh, for outcomes. Okay.
I mean, something around that.
Yeah, I know I had it.
I've added it.
Back because
okay, we've added
Hey,
it.
Candy.
Uh-huh.
Candy, so when you talk about diversity with students and for outcomes, were you saying that a certain percentage or
No,
I'm just
teacher diversity.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew I had.
Meeting,
Yeah, I knew I had that.
benchmarks.
I have added diverse hiring practices under outcomes as well as under direct funding as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. I like that diverse hiring practice.
And I had made a note of that myself.
Okay, thank you.
That was one of the days I was not really slow. I was better that day. Anything else you guys can think of? I want to be respectful of your time, and I know how busy all of you are. And I know even though Angela didn't have a snow day, she still had to work. And I can tell you, those of us in healthcare, we're watching our numbers go up like we haven't seen in months. So it is not a fun time in healthcare, believe me. But is there anything else we need to discuss before we break today? I want to try to get you guys and ladies out of here early. I know you have a lot on your plate, and I want to also tell you how much I appreciate all the work you're putting in on this. We really appreciate it. If anything you think of you want to send directly to me, do not hesitate. Anything else before I close out our meeting? Well, thank you and be safe. And if there's anything you want to get to me or Dominique, make sure you shoot it to us. Thank you and have a great day and be safe.
All right, thank you.